The first time you notice it, you may not trust what you are seeing. The person who was distracted, impatient, or casually dismissive with you suddenly becomes animated when someone important enters the room. Their posture changes, their voice brightens, their attention sharpens, they remember details, they laugh more easily, they offer help before being asked. The warmth is immediate, almost theatrical, yet controlled enough to look natural. A few minutes earlier, they barely acknowledged the receptionist, interrupted a junior colleague, or treated a family member's concern as an inconvenience. Now, in the presence of authority, influence, popularity, or wealth, they seem considerate, curious, and emotionally generous. You may tell yourself they are simply nervous. Perhaps they are trying to make a good impression. Perhaps everyone behaves a little differently around a powerful person. That is true. Human beings naturally adjust their behavior across situations. You do not speak to your employer exactly as you speak to your oldest friend. You may become more formal around a respected elder, more careful around a new client, or more energetic at an important social event. Adaptation is not automatically dishonesty, but sometimes the change is not merely an adjustment in manners. It is a reorganization of character. The person does not simply become more polished. They become more respectful only toward those who can reward them. They become patient only with people whose approval matters. They become loyal only when loyalty improves their position. Their empathy seems to activate in the presence of status and disappear in the presence of vulnerability. Their warmth does not move according to closeness, responsibility, or genuine care. It moves according to advantage. That is the pattern you must learn to recognize, because when someone's personality changes around power, the most important question is not whether they are charming. It is what their charm is responding to. Are they responding to the human being in front of them, or to the access, influence, protection, prestige, or opportunity that person represents? Are you witnessing social intelligence or strategic submission? Are you seeing ordinary nervousness or a deeper habit of valuing people according to usefulness? The difference matters because selective warmth often hides in plain sight. It rarely arrives as open cruelty. It presents itself as professionalism, enthusiasm, loyalty, admiration, politeness, flexibility, or ambition. The person may appear socially gifted. They know how to read a room. They know when to smile, when to agree, when to flatter, when to appear humble, and when to become indispensable. They can make powerful people feel seen while making less powerful people feel invisible. If you miss the pattern, you may trust someone whose kindness depends on your position. You may mistake strategic attention for affection. You may share information with a colleague who is collecting leverage. You may defend a friend who supports you only when your success benefits them. You may build a relationship with someone who treats you well while you are useful, and becomes cold the moment your value changes. You may spend years trying to recover a warmth that was never rooted in genuine regard. The danger is not that such people are always calculating every gesture. Human behavior is often less conscious than that. Some individuals deliberately perform warmth for advantage. Others have repeated the pattern for so long that it feels natural. They may not privately say, "This person is powerful, so I will become charming." Their nervous system may have learnt that power must be pleased, weakness can be ignored, and relationships are safer when they are organized around rank. The motive may be ambition, it may be fear, it may be insecurity, shame, envy, social conditioning, or a desperate need for approval. It may come from growing up in a family where affection depended on pleasing the dominant parent. It may come from workplaces where survival required reading authority carefully. It may come from a belief that respect is scarce and must be borrowed from important people. The cause matters, but the effect matters too. A painful history can explain selective warmth. It does not make the consequences harmless. To read this behavior accurately, you must resist two opposite mistakes. The first is innocence without observation. This is the habit of excusing every contradiction because you want to believe the best. The second is suspicion without evidence. This is the habit of treating every change in tone as proof of manipulation. Both distort judgment. One incident does not establish a personality pattern. A person may be tired, distracted, socially anxious, intimidated, or preoccupied. Someone may become more formal around a senior figure without being fake. A quiet employee may suddenly appear energetic during a presentation because the context demands it. A friend may seem distant at one event because they are overwhelmed. A partner may be unusually attentive around your family because they want to be respectful. The important distinction is repetition. Pay attention to what happens consistently, across different settings, over time. Who receives their patience? Who receives their irritation? Who gets interrupted? Who gets listened to? Whose mistakes are treated with understanding, and whose mistakes are treated with contempt? When there is nothing to gain, does their basic respect remain? Character becomes visible when advantage is removed. A person's treatment of those who cannot promote them, praise them, protect them, introduce them, employ them, desire them, or improve their reputation often reveals more than their behavior toward those who can. This does not mean you should judge someone by a single interaction with a waiter, driver, assistant, cleaner, intern, or stranger. Everyone has bad moments, but a repeated downward shift in courtesy is significant. Imagine a manager who is calm and encouraging during meetings with senior executives. He speaks about teamwork, respect, and psychological safety. He praises his department's effort and accepts responsibility for mistakes. When the executives leave, his tone changes. He becomes sarcastic with junior employees. He blames them for delays he created. He demands late-night work without notice. He dismisses questions as incompetence. The next morning, when leadership returns, he becomes patient again. The key evidence is not that he can be kind. It is that he can control when he is kind. His respectful behavior proves that he understands the standard. He knows how consideration looks. He knows how to regulate his voice, choose careful words, and create an atmosphere of trust. He simply applies those abilities selectively. This may indicate that the problem is not a lack of social skill, it is a hierarchy of concern. Now imagine a different manager. She becomes more formal around executives because she is nervous. She prepares carefully, speaks with precision, and appears more reserved than usual. With junior staff, however, she remains respectful. She may be less polished when stressed, but she apologizes when she becomes abrupt. Her patience is not perfect, yet her basic regard does not disappear when there is no audience. The first manager changes his ethics according to status. The second changes her presentation according to context. These are not the same. Selective warmth is usually revealed by contrast. If you see only the person's behavior toward you, you may not understand the pattern. You need to observe how they behave with people above them, beside them, and below them in the social structure they perceive. Above does not always mean formally superior. Power may come from money, beauty, popularity, confidence, social connections, expertise, family influence, emotional independence, or the ability to leave. A person may become unusually warm towards someone who has no official authority but possesses something they want. Another person may be treated as lower status not because of their job, but because they are shy, dependent, eager to please, socially isolated, or unlikely to retaliate. The hierarchy exists in the observer's mind. This is why selective warmth can appear in friendships. Consider a friend who is affectionate when you are confident, connected, successful, or socially desirable. They call often. They celebrate you publicly. They mention your friendship to others. They want to attend events with you. They seem proud to be associated with you. Then you enter a difficult period. You lose a job, experience public failure, become less socially active, or no longer have access to the people they admire. Their communication changes. They become busy. Their curiosity disappears. Your problems feel heavy to them. They stop defending you in rooms where you are absent. At first you may blame yourself. You may think you became less interesting. You may try to regain their warmth by becoming useful again. You offer introductions, support their projects, hide your difficulties, and perform strength. You do this because you believe the relationship has temporarily lost balance. But what if the balance was always built on reflected status? Some people do not attach only to who you are. They attach to how being near you makes them feel about themselves. Your success becomes a source of identity. Your attention reassures them that they matter. Your connections make them feel included. Your confidence lends them confidence. When those benefits disappear, their emotional investment declines. This may not mean every positive moment was fake. Human motives can be mixed. A person may genuinely enjoy you and still be strongly influenced by what you represent. They may care, but only within the limits of their self-interest. The question is not whether they ever felt affection. The question is whether their affection survives inconvenience, reduced visibility, disagreement, and loss of advantage. Real regard is not proven when everything is rewarding. It is revealed when respect becomes costly. In families, selective warmth may be organized around power in subtler ways. A parent may treat the financially successful child with admiration while dismissing the child who provides emotional labor. A relative may become affectionate when they need help and critical once the need is met. A sibling may show loyalty in private but distance themselves in front of more influential family members. An elder may be gentle with the family member who challenges them and harsh with the one who always forgives. The mistake is to assume that closeness automatically produces respect. Sometimes familiarity reduces performance. A person who manages their behavior carefully in public may release all frustration onto those who feel unable to leave. They reserve their patience for outsiders and their contempt for home. They call this honesty. They say, "I can be myself around you." But being yourself is not the same as abandoning responsibility. Intimacy should allow imperfection. It should not become permission for degradation. If someone consistently gives strangers their restraint and gives loved ones their hostility, the pattern deserves attention. It may indicate that they view love as guaranteed access rather than mutual care. They may believe powerful people require maintenance, while devoted people can be taken for granted. Selective warmth often depends on perceived consequences. People tend to regulate behavior when they believe poor conduct will cost them something. They become less careful when they believe the other person will stay, forgive, remain silent, or doubt themselves. This is one reason boundaries change how you are treated. A boundary does not magically create respect, and it cannot transform every unhealthy person. But it changes the cost structure of the interaction. When you calmly show that access to you is not unconditional, the other person must reveal whether they are capable of genuine adjustment or only temporary performance. Someone who values the relationship may initially feel uncomfortable, but they will try to understand. They may make mistakes, yet their effort becomes more consistent. Someone who values control may become offended that you noticed the imbalance. They may accuse you of being sensitive, ungrateful, arrogant, or difficult. They may briefly become warm to restore access, then return to the same pattern once the threat passes. This is where timing becomes evidence. Do not only observe whether a person becomes kind, observe when the kindness appears. Does warmth return immediately after you withdraw? Does affection increase when they need information? Does respect appear when witnesses are present? Does generosity arrive before a request? Does concern become intense when you gain influence? Does an apology appear only when consequences become unavoidable? Timing does not prove motive, but it can reveal function. If a behavior repeatedly appears at the moment it becomes useful, you should not ignore that relationship. The warmth may be genuine, strategic, or both. Your task is not to read the person's mind. Your task is to understand the pattern well enough to protect your judgment. Many people become trapped because they believe motives must be pure or corrupt. Human behavior is rarely that simple. A colleague may admire you and also want access to your network. A partner may love you and also use affection to avoid accountability. A family member may care about you and still become kinder when they need money. A friend may enjoy your company and still compete with your success. Mixed motives are common. The presence of self-interest does not automatically make a relationship false. Healthy relationships contain mutual benefit. Friends support each other. Colleagues cooperate. Partners depend on each other. Families exchange resources, protection, and care. The problem begins when benefit replaces regard, when respect becomes conditional on usefulness, and when the person hides the transaction while asking you to interpret it as devotion. This is the deeper meaning of strategic social behavior. It is not simply that someone wants something. Everyone wants things. It is that they manage impressions, affection, disclosure, and loyalty in a way designed to preserve advantage while concealing the terms of the exchange. One common sign is unequal curiosity. The person asks many questions about your plans, relationships, weaknesses, opportunities, and opinions, but reveals little of equal value about themselves. They seem interested, and their attention may feel flattering. You leave conversations believing you have become close. Later, you realize they know far more about you than you know about them. Privacy alone is not deception. Some people are naturally reserved. They may take longer to trust. They may listen more than they speak. The important distinction is what they do with the imbalance. Do they protect what you share, or use it to improve their position? Do they reference private details in front of others? Do they adjust their behavior based on your vulnerabilities? Do they pass information upward while maintaining plausible innocence? A strategically warm colleague may invite you to speak openly about frustrations with management. They nod, sympathize, and share vague complaints of their own. You feel understood. Later, a supervisor confronts you using language that closely resembles your private conversation. The colleague denies saying anything. Perhaps they did not quote you directly. Perhaps they framed the disclosure as concern. Perhaps they simply guided the supervisor toward the issue. One event may be coincidence. A repeated pattern of information traveling in one direction is different. The safest response is not immediate accusation. Accusations without evidence often strengthen the other person's position. They can portray you as paranoid, emotional, or unstable. Instead, adjust access, share less, offer information that is accurate but not vulnerable. Notice what travels. Keep sensitive concerns within appropriate channels. In professional settings, document important exchanges, rather than relying only on verbal reassurance. You do not need courtroom certainty before protecting private information. Another sign is audience-sensitive loyalty. The person supports you when the social cost is low but becomes neutral when support might threaten their standing. In private, they tell you that you were treated unfairly. In public, they laugh with the people who mistreated you. Later, they say they were trying to keep the peace. Sometimes this explanation is reasonable. Not every disagreement requires public confrontation. Mature people often choose timing carefully. A friend may avoid escalating a tense situation and speak privately afterward. A colleague may be unable to challenge a superior openly without risking their livelihood. The question is whether their caution is balanced by meaningful action. Do they check on you afterward? Do they clarify what they believe? Do they protect you from further harm? Do they offer practical support? Or do they use private agreement to preserve your loyalty while using public silence to preserve everyone else's approval? A person who always agrees privately and disappears publicly may not be loyal. They may be collecting both sides. Selective warmth is often connected to conflict avoidance. But conflict avoidance and opportunism are not identical. A fearful person may freeze around authority, then feel ashamed. They may admit their fear and try to repair the damage. An opportunistic person is more likely to rewrite the event, minimize your experience, and insist that their neutrality was wisdom. They protect their image rather than examining their behavior. Shame plays a powerful role in these dynamics. People who carry deep shame often organize relationships around external validation. They do not feel secure in their own worth, so they search for evidence that they are important. Proximity to powerful people can temporarily soothe that insecurity. Being praised by a respected figure may feel like proof that they matter. Being associated with status may protect them from feelings of inadequacy. This does not always create exploitation. Many insecure people remain kind and conscientious. But when shame combines with entitlement, envy, or weak self-awareness, the person may begin using others as mirrors. They become warm toward those who reflect value and cold toward those who reflect vulnerability. They may dislike weakness in others because it reminds them of weakness in themselves. They may become impatient with people who are anxious, uncertain, dependent, or socially awkward. At the same time, they may become submissive around confidence and authority. Their behavior moves between contempt and admiration because they have not developed a stable internal sense of equality. They do not meet people as people. They meet them as positions. This creates a recognizable vertical personality. Upward, they are agreeable. Sideways, they are competitive. Downward, they are dismissive. Again, no single interaction proves this structure. But when it repeats, the pattern becomes difficult to ignore. You may see it in a workplace where someone flatters senior leaders, withholds help from peers, and controls junior employees through uncertainty. They appear cooperative upward because they want sponsorship. They appear competitive sideways because peers threaten comparison. They appear dominant downward because subordinates are safe targets. You may see it in a social group where someone constantly studies who is becoming more popular. They shift seats, alliances, humor, and opinions according to the room. They stop inviting an old friend once a more influential group becomes available. They later return when the new group loses interest. You may see it in dating when a person is intensely attentive during pursuit, but becomes indifferent once they feel secure. Then, when you begin to detach, the warmth returns. Their personality seems to switch according to the balance of power. When they fear losing you, they become emotionally available. When they believe you are attached, they become careless. This cycle can be deeply confusing because the returning warmth feels like evidence of love. It may be love, it may also be threat response. A partner who becomes affectionate only when you are leaving may not be responding to your pain. They may be responding to lost control, lost comfort, damaged self-image, or fear of abandonment. The distinction becomes visible after stability returns. Does the change continue once the crisis passes? Do they take responsibility without being chased? Do they improve behavior when there is no immediate risk of losing you? Temporary intensity is not the same as lasting change. Many people remain in harmful relationships because they evaluate sincerity at the emotional peak. The apology is powerful, the tears are convincing, the affection returns, the person appears transformed. But transformation is not measured in the emotional moment. It is measured in ordinary time. Watch what happens 3 weeks later, 3 months later, when the fear has faded and the relationship feels secure again. Consistency is less dramatic than remorse, but more reliable. The same principle applies to friendships. A friend may become supportive when you pull away, then resume dismissing you once closeness is restored. They may not consciously plan the cycle. They may simply value what becomes scarce. Your absence activates appreciation. Your presence activates entitlement. This is why your emotional response can accidentally maintain the pattern. When they become cold, you work harder. When they withdraw, you explain more. When they appear disappointed, you offer reassurance. When they treat you as replaceable, you prove your loyalty. You teach them that reduced warmth produces increased effort. This does not mean you caused their behavior. It means your understandable attempts to save the relationship may reward inconsistency. You become the stabilizing force in a dynamic where the other person controls closeness through unpredictability. Intermittent warmth is psychologically powerful. When affection is reliable, your nervous system can settle. When affection is unpredictable, you become attentive. You search for causes. You monitor tone. You replay conversations. You try to identify the action that will bring the warmth back. The relationship begins to consume more mental space than its quality deserves. You may interpret this preoccupation as proof of depth. You think, I care so much because this person matters. Sometimes you are preoccupied not because the relationship is meaningful, but because it is unstable. Uncertainty creates focus. Inconsistency creates pursuit. A person who changes personality according to power can produce the same effect in groups. You never know which version of them will appear. Alone with you, they are warm. Around admired people, they become distant. When you succeed, they become attentive. When you struggle, they seem embarrassed by you. When they need support, you are important. When you need support, they become unavailable. You begin adapting yourself to preserve their preferred version. You hide weakness. You avoid disagreement. You perform competence. You make yourself useful. You limit your needs. You become easy to be around. Then you call the arrangement friendship. This is one of the most important places to examine your own participation without blaming yourself. Your fears, hopes, and attachment needs can distort interpretation. If you fear abandonment, selective warmth may feel familiar. You may have learned early that love must be earned through usefulness, good behavior, achievement, or emotional silence. When someone alternates attention and distance, you do not immediately see danger. You see a task. You ask, what should I do to get the good version back? A more protective question is, why does basic respect disappear whenever I stop performing? This shift changes the investigation. It moves you away from self-correction and toward pattern recognition. Politeness can also keep you trapped. You may see the change in personality, but avoid naming it because you do not want to appear jealous, bitter, or socially unsophisticated. You tell yourself that ambitious people naturally network. You do not want to judge someone for trying to succeed. That instinct is fair. Ambition is not a moral failure. Networking is not exploitation. Being strategic is not automatically deceptive. The issue is not whether someone builds relationships with influential people. The issue is whether they dehumanize everyone else while doing it. Healthy ambition allows a person to pursue opportunity without abandoning decency. They can introduce themselves to leaders while still acknowledging the assistant. They can cultivate mentors without treating peers as obstacles. They can present their strengths without stealing credit. They can adapt their communication without manufacturing intimacy. They can want advancement without turning every relationship into a ladder. Observe whether the person's ambition expands their responsibility or narrows their humanity? When their status increases, do they become more generous or more contemptuous? Do they remember who helped them? Do they share access? Do they become harder to reach because demands have genuinely increased, or because they now consider old relationships beneath them? Do they use new power to protect others, or to recreate the hierarchy that once frightened them? Power does not always change people. Often, it reduces the need to hide. A person with little power may perform humility because they depend on approval. Once they gain authority, the performance becomes less necessary. Their underlying attitude becomes visible. This is why observing someone's behavior during upward movement can be revealing. Consider a colleague who was friendly when you were equals. You exchanged ideas, shared frustrations, and helped each other. Then they received a promotion. Gradually, they stopped acknowledging your contribution. They began repeating your ideas in meetings without credit. They became formal in public and familiar only when they needed assistance. When you raised a concern, they said you were having difficulty accepting their success. It is possible that your feelings contain some envy. Human emotions are complicated, but the presence of envy would not automatically erase their behavior. Two things can be true. You may feel unsettled by the changed hierarchy, and they may be using the hierarchy to rewrite the relationship. Emotional honesty requires you to examine yourself without surrendering your perception. Ask what is observable. What exactly changed? Frequency of communication? Tone? Credit? Access? Expectations? Public acknowledgement? Private requests? Focus on behavior rather than global judgments such as they became fake or they think they are better than everyone. Specific evidence protects you from both denial and exaggeration. You might say to yourself, before the promotion, we shared responsibility and credit. Since the promotion, they have presented 3 of my contributions as their own and contacted me mainly when they need background information. This statement is more useful than calling them manipulative. It gives you something concrete to respond to. You can then change your behavior intelligently. Put ideas in writing, clarify ownership, ask direct questions in meetings, reduce informal labor that goes unrecognized. Keep communication professional. You do not need to expose their character to protect your work. Calm precision is often more effective than emotional confrontation. People who depend on impression management are skilled at surviving vague accusations. If you say, you only care about powerful people, they can deny it, become offended, and focus on your tone. If you say, I noticed that my name was removed from the proposal after I completed the analysis. I need my contribution documented before the next review. The conversation becomes harder to redirect. Boundaries should address behavior, not imagined motive. You do not need the person to admit why they acted. You need clarity about what you will participate in. The same approach works in personal relationships. Instead of saying, you only love me when I am leaving, you might say, when I raise concerns, you withdraw for days. When I begin distancing myself, you become affectionate, but the original issue remains unresolved. I am not willing to continue that cycle. We can discuss the concern directly, or I will step back. This statement does not diagnose. It does not threaten revenge. It describes the sequence and establishes a limit. The response becomes additional evidence. A person capable of mutuality may feel defensive at first, but they can eventually engage with the pattern. A person focused on control may ignore the sequence and attack your character. They may accuse you of being dramatic, selfish, disloyal, oversensitive, or influenced by others. They may create urgency so you abandon reflection. They may suddenly introduce unrelated grievances. They may become extremely warm without addressing the issue. Do not let emotional intensity replace information. Return to the pattern. Ask the same clear question. Slow the interaction down. Refuse false urgency. If the conversation becomes confusing, pause it. You are not required to solve a relationship while dysregulated. Strategic warmth often relies on speed. The person wants you to respond before you can compare their words with previous behavior. They may overwhelm you with affection, explanations, guilt, promises, or crisis. Your nervous system becomes flooded. You choose relief over clarity. Time is one of your strongest protections. You can say, I need time to think. You can delay a commitment. You can review what was said. You can speak to someone neutral. You can compare the new promise with earlier patterns. A sincere person may dislike waiting, but they can respect it. A controlling person often treats your pause as disobedience. Pressure reveals entitlement. Another pattern appears when someone's values change according to the audience. With one group, they condemn gossip. With another, they participate. Around powerful people, they praise loyalty. Around vulnerable people, they reward betrayal. They speak about fairness when fairness benefits them, and about toughness when fairness would limit them. Everyone contains contradictions. Values are difficult to apply consistently. The issue is not perfection. The issue is convenience. Does the person use principles to guide their own behavior, or only to control the behavior of others? Do they accept accountability under the same standards they impose? Do they change moral language whenever the power balance changes? A family member may insist that younger relatives show respect while speaking cruelly to them. A supervisor may demand transparency while withholding information. A friend may expect confidentiality while sharing your private life. A partner may call your distance punishment while using silence to control you. Selective principles are closely related to selective warmth because both organize behavior around advantage. The person is not asking, "What is right here?" They are asking, often unconsciously, "Which rule protects my position?" This does not require you to become cynical. It requires you to watch consequences. Words reveal identity claims. Repeated behavior reveals priorities. People often tell you how they want to be seen. They say they value honesty, loyalty, compassion, independence, fairness, humility, or family. These statements may be sincere aspirations, but an aspiration is not yet a pattern. Look at what happens when honesty threatens status, when loyalty becomes inconvenient, when compassion requires sacrifice, when fairness limits advantage, and when humility receives no applause. Pressure exposes the ranking of values. A selectively warm person may appear exceptionally empathetic when empathy increases admiration. They offer public support, write thoughtful messages, and position themselves near visible suffering. Yet in private, where care is repetitive and unrecognized, they become absent. They are not necessarily pretending to care. They may enjoy the identity of being caring more than the practice of care itself. This distinction is painful because image-based kindness can feel real. It may include genuine emotion, but emotion without consistency can still leave others unsupported. Suppose a friend posts publicly about always being available for people in crisis. When you privately ask for a conversation after a difficult event, they respond with a heart symbol and disappear. Days later, they tell a group how worried they were about you. Their concern becomes visible where your need remained unmet. One event does not prove exploitation. They may have been overwhelmed, but if the pattern repeats, their compassion may be functioning more as identity than responsibility. You can acknowledge their limitations without depending on them. This is a crucial form of emotional maturity. Not every disappointing person must be exposed, punished, or cut off dramatically. Sometimes the clearest response is simply to reclassify the relationship. You stop treating a socially warm person as a confidential friend. You stop expecting private courage from someone who offers only public agreement. You stop asking emotional consistency from someone who repeatedly provides performance. You place them at the distance their behavior can support. This protects you from resentment, because resentment often grows where expectations remain higher than evidence. Reclassification is not cruelty. It is accuracy. You may still be polite. You may cooperate professionally. You may enjoy limited interactions. You may appreciate what the person genuinely offers. But you no longer give them access that requires qualities they have not demonstrated. Trust should be specific. You may trust someone to complete technical work, but not to protect confidential information. You may trust a relative to help in an emergency, but not to respond sensitively to emotional disclosure. You may trust a friend for enjoyable company, but not for loyalty under social pressure. You may trust a partner's affection while questioning their conflict behavior. Thinking in specific terms prevents the all-or-nothing mistake. You do not need to decide that someone is entirely trustworthy or entirely false. You can identify where their behavior is stable and where it is not. This is especially important when power is involved, because people may behave differently depending on what they believe you can do. A selectively warm person may become respectful once you gain status. This change can feel validating. Someone who ignored your ideas begins asking for your opinion. A relative who dismissed your plans becomes proud of you after public success. A former friend returns when you become visible. A colleague who excluded you becomes generous after you gain influence. Part of you may enjoy the reversal. You may think, "Now they finally see my worth." Be careful. They may not be seeing your worth. They may be seeing your leverage. This does not mean you must reject every person who changes their behavior after your success. Sometimes people genuinely revise their judgment. They may recognize that they underestimated you. They may feel remorse. They may become more respectful because your achievement challenged their assumptions. The difference appears in how they handle the past. A sincere revision can tolerate honesty. The person may say, "I did not take you seriously before, and I was wrong." They do not demand immediate closeness. They show respect even if you cannot help them. Their change remains consistent without special access. A strategic revision often erases history. The person behaves as though they always supported you. They exaggerate old closeness. They expect benefits from the new relationship. If you do not provide access, their warmth declines again. Watch what happens when you offer respect, but no advantage. That is one of the cleanest tests available. You do not need to create traps or manipulate the person. Simply avoid rushing to provide introductions, money, confidential information, influence, or emotional labor. Let the relationship exist without immediate reward. See whether their interest survives. Genuine curiosity can tolerate ordinary contact. Strategic curiosity often becomes impatient. The person may begin hinting at what they need. They mention a project, opportunity, problem, or person they want to meet. They flatter your character. They remind you of shared history. They create a moral frame in which helping them proves loyalty. This is where guilt may enter. They may say, "I thought you were different. I would do it for you. After everything we have been through, you have changed since becoming successful." These statements may express real hurt. They may also be attempts to convert your status into obligation. Separate the request from the emotional pressure. Ask yourself whether the request is reasonable, whether you have enough information, whether the risk is acceptable, and whether you would agree without the guilt. You are allowed to say no without proving that your success has not changed you. A healthy relationship can survive your limits. Selective warmth is sometimes more subtle in romantic relationships because attraction naturally changes behavior. People are often more attentive during courtship. They dress carefully, listen closely, plan dates, and manage impressions. This is not necessarily deception. Early relationships involve discovery, uncertainty, and effort. The concern arises when kindness disappears after commitment while reappearing around external competition. A partner may be affectionate at social events but dismissive at home. They praise you when others admire you and criticize you when you are alone. They become attentive when someone else shows interest in you, then indifferent once the threat passes. They maintain the public image of a loving relationship while treating private needs as burdens. Again, the issue is not constant romance. No relationship can remain in courtship intensity forever. People become tired, routine develops, and affection changes form. The important distinction is whether respect remains during ordinary life. Does the partner listen without an audience? Do they repair after conflict? Can they tolerate your independence? Do they care about your experience when no one is watching? Does their warmth depend on ownership, competition, or image? Public affection cannot compensate for private contempt. Some people use status inside relationships to control emotional reality. The partner with more income, education, social confidence, or family support may act as though their interpretation is automatically more valid. They become charming with outsiders and condescending with the person closest to them. Because outsiders see the charming version, the partner begins doubting their own experience. This is one of the most destabilizing effects of personality switching. When others describe the person as kind, generous, patient, and thoughtful, you may wonder whether you are causing the problem. You may think, "They are good with everyone else. Why do they become cold with me?" The difference can become evidence against your own perception, but public charm does not disprove private harm. At the same time, private conflict does not automatically prove deliberate manipulation. Couples often trigger each other in ways outsiders do not. Stress, attachment fear, unresolved resentment, and communication habits can create behavior that appears inconsistent across settings. You need to examine the full pattern. Does the person acknowledge the private behavior? Do they work to change it? Do they show concern about its effect? Or do they use their public reputation to invalidate you? A partner who says, "I understand why this is confusing. I am more controlled around others, and I have been taking my frustration out on you. That is not acceptable," is showing accountability. A partner who says, "Everyone else thinks I am wonderful, so you must be the problem," is using social approval as a weapon. Reputation is not evidence of innocence inside a specific relationship. The same dynamic can occur with parents. A parent may be admired in the community for generosity and patience while controlling their children through fear at home. The child grows up believing that no one will understand because the parent's public identity is too strong. When the child finally speaks, relatives defend the parent's image instead of examining the behavior. This can damage trust in perception for years. The adult child may become unusually sensitive to charming authority figures, or, in the opposite direction, deeply suspicious of anyone socially skilled. Both responses are understandable. Neither is ideal. Recovery requires learning that charm and cruelty are not mutually exclusive, but neither are charm and goodness. Social skill is a tool. Its meaning depends on how it is used. Do not distrust warmth because some people weaponize it. Learn to look for integration. An integrated person may behave differently across roles, but the core remains recognizable. They can be formal with a client and playful with a friend, yet respect exists in both settings. They can pursue influence without humiliating people. They can become frustrated without rewriting reality. They can protect privacy without collecting secrets. They can admire power without surrendering principles. Their personality has range, not fragmentation. By contrast, the strategically adaptive person may appear to have entirely different moral identities. They do not merely adjust tone, they adjust allegiance, empathy, memory, and truth. Memory is especially revealing. Some people remember what benefits their position and forget what creates obligation. They remember the help they gave you, but forget the help you gave them. They remember your emotional reaction, but forget the provocation. They remember private promises when you are expected to perform, and forget them when accountability moves toward them. All memory is selective to some degree. Human beings naturally reconstruct events in self-protective ways. A contradiction does not prove intentional lying, but repeated memory that always favors the same person deserves attention. Notice the direction of the distortion. Does confusion consistently increase their control? Do missing details consistently remove their responsibility? Do they become precise when describing your mistakes and vague when describing their own? Do they insist that your memory is unreliable whenever you ask for accountability? This may indicate more than forgetfulness. It may be a pattern of self-serving reconstruction. The practical response is to ground important matters in concrete records. In a workplace, follow up conversations with written summaries. In shared finances, maintain transparent documentation. In family agreements, clarify expectations. In relationships, write down events privately if repeated confusion is weakening your confidence. The purpose is not to build a secret case against everyone. It is to preserve your orientation when reality is repeatedly disputed. You should also distinguish strategic ambiguity from ordinary uncertainty. A thoughtful person may say, "I do not remember exactly." A defensive person may remember differently. Neither response is automatically manipulative. The concern grows when the person uses uncertainty selectively, refuses all clarification, and punishes you for asking. Healthy uncertainty leaves room for investigation. Strategic confusion closes the investigation, while preserving advantage. Someone may say, "We probably remember it differently. Let us look at the messages." Another may say, "The fact that you need evidence proves you do not trust me." Then turn the conversation into your loyalty. This is an attempt to make verification feel immoral. Do not accept that frame. Trust and clarity are not enemies. In healthy relationships, clarity supports trust. When someone repeatedly benefits from confusion, verification becomes reasonable. Another overlooked sign is how the person reacts to people who cannot be impressed. A secure individual can tolerate someone who remains calm, independent, and unimpressed by status. A person organized around hierarchy may experience this as disrespect. They expect visible submission. They want laughter, agreement, admiration, quick responses, or emotional deference. When someone treats them with ordinary equality, they may become cold. This can happen with a new supervisor who interprets confidence as defiance. It can happen with a socially dominant friend who dislikes people they cannot embarrass. It can happen with a parent who experiences an adult child's boundary as betrayal. It can happen with a partner who calls emotional independence distance. The issue is not that the person wants respect. Everyone deserves respect. The issue is that they define respect as proof of lower rank. Confidence and dominance must be separated. Confidence does not require another person to shrink. Dominance often does. A confident person can explain a decision, hear disagreement, and remain stable. A dominance-focused person treats disagreement as a status challenge. Their warmth may depend on your willingness to confirm their superiority. This creates a difficult trap for polite people. You may think cooperation requires visible submission. You soften every sentence, over-explain every limit, and apologize for reasonable needs. The more carefully you speak, the more entitled the person becomes. Your politeness is interpreted not as maturity, but as evidence that pressure works. The solution is not aggression. It is firmness without excessive emotional labor. You can say, "I understand your position, I do not agree." You can say, "That does not work for me." You can say, "I will not discuss this while being insulted." You can say, "I have already answered." These statements do not attack. They remove the opportunity to turn your boundary into a negotiation about your character. A person accustomed to status-based control may escalate when calm pressure fails. They may become colder, louder, more charming, more wounded, or more public. They are searching for the version of influence that still works. Do not chase every version. Hold the same line. Consistency on your side makes inconsistency on theirs easier to see. This is also how you protect yourself from being pulled into imitation. When you spend enough time around strategically adaptive people, you may begin responding in kind. You become warm when useful, distant when threatened, vague when accountable, and charming when observed. You tell yourself you are learning the game, but the cost of surviving every power system by becoming like it is that you lose an internal standard. Social intelligence should improve your judgment, not corrupt your character. You can understand hierarchy without worshipping it. You can protect information without becoming deceptive. You can recognize manipulation without manipulating back. You can maintain distance without using silence as punishment. You can become difficult to exploit without becoming impossible to know. This balance matters because fear can turn awareness into paranoia. Once you learn about selective warmth, you may start noticing changes everywhere. A friend becomes more energetic around someone popular. A colleague speaks more formally to leadership. A partner is friendlier at a social event. You may begin interpreting every adjustment as proof of hidden motives. That would be a mistake. Human beings are responsive. We become more alert around evaluation. We mirror energy. We adapt language. We seek belonging. We sometimes neglect people unintentionally while trying to manage social pressure. We may be awkward with strangers, overly enthusiastic with admired figures, or quiet around conflict. Awareness must remain proportional to evidence. Ask whether basic respect changes, not merely style. Ask whether the difference produces harm. Ask whether the behavior is repeated. Ask whether accountability is possible. Ask whether the person benefits from the switch. Ask whether they become warmer only when power is present and colder only when consequences are absent. Do not turn ordinary complexity into a criminal case. The purpose of observation is not to catch everyone. It is to see clearly enough that you stop abandoning yourself. A useful way to think about the pattern is to watch 4 forms of consistency. Consistency across status, consistency across audience, consistency across need, and consistency across time. You do not need to turn these into a visible checklist. Simply let them guide your attention. Across status, does the person preserve basic dignity when speaking to someone with less influence? Across audience, does their private position resemble their public one? Across need, does affection remain when they do not require something? Across time, do apologies and promises produce sustained behavior? No person will be perfectly consistent in all 4. The question is whether the variation is understandable or exploitative. Consider a social situation. A woman named Sarah has a friend, Nadia, who is warm and supportive in private. Nadia often tells Sarah that she admires her intelligence, but whenever the group includes a socially dominant friend, Nadia interrupts Sarah, jokes about her insecurities, and subtly distances herself. Afterward, Nadia sends affectionate messages and says, "You know I was only joking." Sarah initially assumes Nadia is trying to fit in. She forgives the behavior because the private friendship feels genuine. Over time, however, the same pattern repeats. Nadia uses Sarah's vulnerability as social currency whenever she wants approval from the group. The core issue is not the joke. It is that Nadia converts private access into public advantage. Sarah's first impulse may be to explain how hurt she feels and ask for reassurance. Nadia is likely to provide it. The warmth will return in private, but unless the public behavior changes, The reassurance is only repairing access. A more useful response would be specific. Sarah might say, "I have noticed that you bring up private things about me when certain people are around. I do not consent to that. I will no longer share personal information with you if it happens again." This boundary identifies the behavior and changes access. It does not require Nadia to agree with Sarah's interpretation. If Nadia cares about the relationship, she may feel embarrassed but change. If she mocks the boundary, blames Sarah's sensitivity, or repeats the behavior, the evidence becomes clearer. Now consider a workplace example. Daniel is a junior analyst. His colleague Marcus is friendly when they work alone. Marcus asks about Daniel's ideas and encourages him to share early drafts. In meetings with executives, Marcus presents the strongest parts of Daniel's work as his own and becomes strangely formal toward him. When Daniel tries to clarify credit, Marcus says, "We are all on the same team." The phrase sounds cooperative, but the benefit is one-directional. Team language is being used to dissolve ownership downward while preserving recognition upward. Daniel might feel tempted to confront Marcus privately with accusations. Marcus could deny intent and describe Daniel as insecure. A stronger response would involve process. Daniel can circulate drafts with dates, summarize contributions in shared channels, and speak early in meetings about the sections he developed. He can remain professional while reducing the opportunity for appropriation. This is not manipulation. It is structural protection. When someone's behavior changes around status, changing the structure often works better than trying to change their personality. In families, the structure may involve money, caregiving, access, or emotional labor. Suppose an uncle is affectionate whenever he needs financial help. He praises your generosity, recalls family loyalty, and speaks about how close you have always been. Once the crisis passes, he becomes critical and distant. The next request arrives with renewed warmth. You may continue helping because refusing feels cruel. The family may pressure you. They may say money should not matter between relatives, but money already matters in the relationship. It is organizing the affection. You can separate compassion from unlimited access. You may offer an amount you can afford to lose, provide non-financial support, or decline entirely. You do not need to prove that the warmth is fake. You only need to recognize that repeated emergencies and temporary affection are creating an unhealthy obligation. A boundary might sound like, "I am not able to provide more money. I can help you look at other options." If the relationship collapses after the financial access ends, the collapse reveals something important. Sometimes the most painful evidence is what disappears when the benefit disappears. In romantic situations, selective warmth may involve competition. Imagine a partner who becomes especially attentive when you are admired by others. They compliment you, hold your hand, and speak proudly about the relationship. At home, they are often emotionally unavailable. When you ask for closeness, they say they are tired. When another person shows interest in you, their affection intensifies. This may indicate jealousy, fear of loss, or renewed appreciation. It does not automatically mean manipulation. The important question is whether the increased attention leads to a deeper conversation and sustained change, or whether it fades as soon as the threat disappears. You might say, "I notice we feel closest when there is some risk of losing each other. I want closeness that does not depend on competition. Are you willing to work on that with me?" The answer matters, but the pattern after the answer matters more. In social groups, selective warmth often appears as alliance shifting. A person becomes close to whoever currently shapes the group's opinion. They adopt that person's language, preferences, and conflicts. When leadership changes, their loyalty changes too. They may explain each shift as personal growth, but the direction consistently follows influence. Again, adaptation alone is not dishonesty. People learn from groups. Opinions change. Relationships evolve. The warning sign is when the person repeatedly abandons private convictions to remain near power, then rewrites the past to appear consistent. Such people can be dangerous confidants because their loyalty belongs less to individuals than to the winning side. You do not need to reject them completely, but you should be cautious about sharing information that could become valuable during a future shift. Protecting private information is not secrecy born from fear. It is recognizing that access should be earned through demonstrated care. Many people overshare because selective warmth feels intimate. The person pays close attention, mirrors your emotions, and makes you feel understood. You interpret intensity as trustworthiness. But attention and loyalty are different capacities. Someone may be excellent at making you feel seen and poor at protecting what they see. Before sharing something sensitive, observe how they speak about absent people. Do they reveal other people's secrets while claiming special closeness with you? Do they justify disclosure by saying, "I am only telling you because I trust you"? Do they collect private information as a way of bonding? If they build intimacy through other people's exposure, your exposure may eventually serve the same function. Do not assume you are the exception to a method. You can enjoy connection while allowing trust to develop gradually. Share in layers. Notice whether boundaries are respected. Notice whether disagreement changes their care. Notice whether they use your vulnerability during conflict. Notice whether private knowledge appears in public humor, gossip, or indirect pressure. Trust is not created by how quickly someone enters your inner world. It is created by what they do after entering. Selective warmth may also be directed toward you because the person fears you. Not every status-sensitive change is an attempt to gain advantage. Sometimes people become unusually agreeable because they expect punishment. They may have experienced authority as dangerous. They monitor your mood, avoid disagreement, and flatter you because they do not feel safe. If you hold power over them, their warmth may not reveal admiration. It may reveal self-protection. This is an uncomfortable possibility, especially if you see yourself as approachable. A manager may believe employees genuinely agree with every idea because no one challenges them. A parent may believe adult children enjoy constant contact because they never refuse. A socially dominant friend may believe the group loves their humor because everyone laughs. Power reduces honest feedback. If people consistently change around you, you should not only ask what it reveals about them, ask what it may reveal about the environment you create. Do you punish disagreement? Do you withdraw affection when challenged? Do you remember mistakes and ignore contributions? Do people have to manage your emotions before speaking honestly? Do you call obedience respect? This investigation should not become a tool for placing yourself above everyone else. You are also a participant in status systems. You also change behavior around approval. You may be warmer to people who admire you and colder to those who question you. You may perform humility upward and dominance downward without fully recognizing it. Self-observation protects you from hypocrisy. Think about how you treat people when you are stressed and no consequences seem likely. Think about whether you become more patient with impressive strangers than with familiar loved ones. Think about whether you remember someone only when they become useful. Think about whether you dismiss quiet people and seek confident ones. Think about whether your principles change when accountability threatens your image. The goal is not self-condemnation. It is integration. A person becomes trustworthy not by never adapting, but by keeping core values active across adaptation. You may speak differently to different people. You may pursue opportunity. You may admire status. You may protect yourself in unequal systems. None of this automatically makes you false. The question is whether your pursuit of safety or success requires another person's dignity to become optional. That is the line. People who change around power often learnt the pattern early. In some homes, children discover that the emotional climate depends on one dominant figure. They become experts at reading tone, posture, footsteps, and silence. They learn when to speak, when to disappear, when to flatter, and when to agree. They may become charming and socially perceptive adults because perception once protected them. This history can create compassion. It can also create risk. The child who survived by pleasing power may become the adult who cannot relate without ranking. They may attach to authority, resent dependence, and control those who appear safer. They may confuse love with appeasement and respect with fear. They may not know how to remain equal in a relationship. Understanding this can help you respond without hatred. But compassion does not require participation in the pattern. You can recognize that someone's behavior comes from fear, while still refusing to become the place where that fear is discharged. You can say, internally, "I understand why you learnt this. I will not let you use it to diminish me." This is mature empathy. It sees context without erasing consequence. Envy can also drive personality shifts. A person may appear supportive while you are at a similar level, then become colder as you succeed. Your progress changes the power balance. It forces comparison. They may feel left behind, exposed, or less important. Rather than acknowledge envy, they reduce warmth, criticize your motives, or align themselves with people above you. Envy is not proof of bad character. Almost everyone experiences it. The important question is what the person does with it. A self-aware person may take distance, reflect, and return with honesty. They can celebrate you while managing their discomfort. An unreflective person may punish you for activating feelings they refuse to own. They may say you have become arrogant when you have simply become confident. They may minimize your achievement, question your integrity, or become unusually supportive of your critics. Their behavior allows them to restore a sense of equality by lowering you. You may respond by shrinking your success to preserve the relationship. You stop sharing good news. You downplay opportunities. You apologize for growth. You make yourself less visible so they can remain comfortable. This is a high price for connection. A relationship that requires your self-reduction is not stable. It is dependent on hierarchy. You do not need to boast or demand constant celebration, but you should notice who can remain emotionally fair when your life expands. Likewise, notice how you respond to other people's success. Do you become distant? Do you search for flaws? Do you offer warmth only when you feel superior? The same pattern you fear in others can exist quietly in you. Emotional control is not the absence of envy. It is the ability to feel envy without turning it into sabotage. The more stable your identity becomes, the less you need to reorganize relationships around rank. You can admire without submitting, compete without dehumanizing, and succeed without forgetting. This internal stability is your strongest defense against selective warmth, because it reduces your hunger for status-based approval. People are easier to manipulate when they urgently need to be chosen by someone impressive. A powerful person's attention can feel like confirmation that you are valuable. You may ignore contradictions because losing the relationship would feel like losing your upgraded identity. This is common in mentorships, elite social circles, romantic relationships with highly admired partners, and workplaces where access is scarce. The person with status offers warmth, and you interpret it as proof that you are special. You tolerate disrespect because the association feels meaningful. Ask yourself what the relationship allows you to believe about yourself. Does being near this person make you feel more important, intelligent, attractive, successful, spiritual, connected, or protected? There is nothing wrong with enjoying admiration or opportunity. The danger appears when your identity becomes dependent on the association. You become willing to exchange judgment for belonging. A status-sensitive person may sense this need. They provide selective attention to maintain your effort. They praise you privately but keep you uncertain publicly. They suggest future opportunities without making commitments. They make you feel almost chosen. Almost can become a powerful form of control. You continue proving yourself because the reward seems close. You provide labor, loyalty, emotional support, introductions, ideas, and silence. The relationship remains undefined enough that they can deny obligation and intimate enough that you hesitate to leave. The solution is to convert implication into clarity. Ask direct questions. What exactly are you offering? What responsibility will I have? How will credit be assigned? Are you asking for exclusivity? What does this commitment involve? When will a decision be made? A sincere person may not have every answer, but they can tolerate the questions. Someone benefiting from ambiguity may respond with disappointment, flattery, delay, or pressure. They may say formal clarity would damage trust. Trust that cannot survive clarity is usually serving someone. False urgency is another tool that appears in status-based dynamics. A powerful or socially skilled person may insist that you decide quickly. They frame hesitation as weakness, disloyalty, or lack of vision. They want access before you can consult others or examine the terms. Slow down. Urgency may be real. Some decisions have deadlines. But when the urgency is accompanied by secrecy, guilt, vague rewards, or pressure to bypass normal safeguards, caution is reasonable. You can say, "I do not make this type of decision immediately." You can request written details. You can ask what changes if you wait. You can refuse to be impressed by their impatience. Your pace is part of your boundary. A person who changes personality around status may also try to borrow your status. They mention your name, imply closeness, or use private access to strengthen their image. They may introduce themselves as your friend when the relationship is limited. They may speak for you without permission. They may exaggerate your support for their plans. This can seem flattering at first. You feel valued, but borrowed credibility can create consequences. Other people may assume you endorse behavior you have not examined. Be clear about representation. You can say, "Please do not use my name in that context." You can correct misunderstandings early. You can avoid vague endorsements. You can distinguish kindness toward a person from support for their project. Boundaries around your name, network, and reputation are not vanity. They are responsibility. At the same time, do not become obsessed with controlling every interpretation. You cannot prevent people from discussing you. You can only clarify where the stakes are meaningful. The deeper skill is learning to remain calm when someone's mask appears to switch. Shock often makes people reactive. You may confront the person immediately, expose them publicly, or attempt to force an admission. You want them to acknowledge the contradiction so you can trust your perception. But people rarely confess to an identity they are invested in protecting. If their social advantage depends on appearing kind, loyal, humble, or fair, direct accusations may activate strong defense. They may attack your credibility, gather allies, or present your reaction as the real problem. Do not confuse silence with surrender. Sometimes the strongest immediate response is observation. Let the pattern become clearer. Reduce unnecessary disclosure. Protect important work. Strengthen outside relationships. Keep your behavior steady. Ask specific questions when needed. Do not provide emotional material that can be used to distract from facts. You are not preparing revenge. You are restoring information. Once you have enough clarity, choose the level of response the situation requires. Some patterns need a conversation. Some need a structural change. Some need distance. Some need formal reporting. Some need acceptance that the person cannot offer what you hoped. Not every pattern needs dramatic confrontation. You may simply stop asking a status-driven friend for loyalty. You may move communication with a colleague into documented channels. You may limit a relative's access to money. You may refuse private meetings with someone who changes stories. You may leave a relationship where affection functions as control. Withdrawal can be calm. It does not need to be announced as punishment. A boundary protects your participation. Punishment attempts to control the other person's feelings. You can reduce access without trying to make them suffer. This distinction protects your integrity. You may feel tempted to make the person experience the same uncertainty they created. You could become warm and cold, withhold information, create jealousy, or use status against them. These tactics may produce short-term satisfaction. They also keep you psychologically tied to the same hierarchy. The goal is not to defeat the person at their own game. The goal is to stop living inside the game. Emotional detachment, in this context, does not mean becoming numb. It means loosening your need for their consistency to validate your perception. You can feel disappointment without chasing explanation. You can grieve the relationship you imagined without reopening access. You can accept mixed motives without solving every contradiction. Some people will never tell you why their warmth changed. They may not understand it themselves. Closure often comes from the pattern, not the confession. If someone repeatedly respects you only when you hold leverage, that pattern is information. If someone repeatedly becomes affectionate only when access is threatened, that pattern is information. If someone repeatedly supports you privately and abandons you publicly, that pattern is information. You do not need to turn information into hatred. You only need to let it affect your decisions. This is how you recover trust in your own judgment. You stop demanding impossible certainty. You stop waiting for proof that would satisfy the person who benefits from your doubt. You learn to make proportionate decisions based on repeated behavior. Proportion matters. A mild inconsistency may require caution. A serious breach may require distance. A workplace pattern may require documentation. A coercive relationship may require outside support and a safe exit. You do not respond to every concern with the same intensity. Calm judgment asks, what is the risk? What is the evidence? What access does this person currently have? What boundary matches the situation? Paranoia asks, how do I make sure no one can ever deceive me again? You cannot create a life with zero vulnerability. Trust always contains uncertainty. Connection always involves risk. The attempt to eliminate all risk can produce isolation, rigidity, and emotional coldness. The goal is not to become impossible to hurt. It is to become less willing to ignore what hurts you repeatedly. You can remain open while being observant. You can assume ordinary human complexity until the pattern suggests more. You can give second chances without giving endless access. You can forgive without restoring the same level of trust. You can understand someone's fear without volunteering to absorb its consequences. This balance is what mature social intelligence looks like. It does not make you the judge of everyone's hidden motives. It makes you responsible for what you continue to participate in. People reveal themselves gradually. They reveal themselves in how they behave when they are not trying to win you. They reveal themselves in how they respond when you say no. They reveal themselves when someone less powerful makes a mistake. They reveal themselves when your success changes the comparison. They reveal themselves when there is no audience, no immediate reward, and no fear of consequence. Do not focus only on the most impressive version of a person. Look for the version that appears under ordinary conditions. Charm is easy to overvalue because it is vivid. Consistency is quieter. It does not create the same emotional rush. A consistently respectful person may seem less exciting than someone who offers intense, selective attention. They may not flatter you, mirror every feeling, or create instant intimacy, but they remain recognizable across contexts. Their regard does not depend on your rank. This kind of person may disappoint you occasionally. They may be distracted, awkward, blunt, or emotionally limited. Yet when the situation changes, their ethics do not disappear. They can apologize without becoming theatrical. They can disagree without withdrawing humanity. They can admire powerful people without humiliating vulnerable ones. Do not confuse smoothness with safety. Some safe people are socially imperfect. Some unsafe people are socially brilliant. The ability to read people begins when you stop evaluating only how they make you feel in the moment. A warm interaction can make you feel chosen. A cold interaction can make you feel rejected. Both emotions can narrow perception. Instead, widen the frame. What happened before the warmth? What does the person want now? How do they behave after receiving it? How do they treat people who offer nothing? What happens when you disagree? Does their interest survive your boundary? Does their respect survive your reduced usefulness? These questions do not require suspicion. They require patience. Time exposes what intensity hides. The person who is strategically warm often wants the relationship to move faster than evidence. They want trust before consistency, loyalty before reciprocity, access before accountability, and forgiveness before change. They may use emotional language to make caution seem cold. You are allowed to let trust grow at the speed of proof. You are allowed to enjoy someone without immediately depending on them. You are allowed to appreciate kindness without assigning it more meaning than it has earned. You are allowed to notice a troubling contrast without deciding the person is evil. You are allowed to step back before you can perfectly explain why. Your nervous system may resist this. If you are accustomed to unstable relationships, calm observation can feel passive. You may want to fix the tension quickly. You may fear that a boundary will cause abandonment. You may believe that waiting is unkind, but urgency often serves the pattern. Slow awareness restores choice. When you stop reacting immediately to every change in warmth, you become harder to steer. The person can become charming without buying your trust. They can become cold without forcing your pursuit. They can express disappointment without controlling your decision. They can hold status without overriding your judgment. This is emotional control in practice. It is not dominance. It is the ability to remain connected to your own standards while someone else changes their presentation. You may still feel flattered. You may still feel intimidated. You may still hope the person's attention is genuine. Emotional control does not require you to eliminate those responses. It requires you to avoid turning them into immediate commitments. Feel first. Decide later. A person's warmth is an experience. Trust is a conclusion. Do not confuse them. The deepest problem with selective warmth is not simply that someone behaves differently around power. It is that the behavior can pressure you to see yourself through the same hierarchy. When they become warm, you feel valuable. When they become cold, you feel diminished. Their attention becomes a ranking system inside your mind. You begin measuring your worth through their responsiveness. This gives them more power than their behavior deserves. Your dignity cannot depend on which version of another person appears. Their warmth may reflect admiration, need, fear, ambition, insecurity, or opportunity. Their coldness may reflect disappointment, envy, entitlement, distraction, or self-protection. These reactions contain information about the relationship, but they are not final judgments about your value. The moment you understand this, the mask loses some of its force. You no longer rush to earn the warm version. You no longer collapse beneath the cold version. You observe both. You may discover that some people are not intentionally deceptive. They are fragmented. They have never learnt how to remain themselves across power differences. Around authority, they become compliant. Around vulnerability, they become controlling. Around admiration, they become generous. Around disappointment, they become punitive. They may be capable of growth, but growth requires awareness and responsibility. You cannot provide those for them. You can invite honesty. You can name behavior. You can model consistency. You can create consequences. But you cannot build an integrated character inside another person. Watch whether they become curious about the pattern or merely defensive about the image. Curiosity creates possibility. A person might say, "I did not realize I become dismissive around that group. I think I was trying too hard to impress them." They may feel ashamed, but they remain engaged. Over time, their behavior changes. Defensiveness protects repetition. The person may say, "You are jealous. You are imagining things." That is just how social situations work. Everyone changes around important people. They focus on normalizing the behavior rather than examining its effect. You do not need instant perfection. Look for honest effort. Change usually appears as small consistency before it appears as a new identity. The person interrupts less. They correct themselves. They stop sharing private information. They give credit when no one forces them. They maintain respect when influential people enter the room. They tolerate your boundary without withdrawing affection. These are meaningful signs. Promises about being different matter less than differences you can observe. If change does not occur, acceptance becomes necessary. Acceptance does not mean approval. It means you stop negotiating with reality. You accept that the colleague is cooperative only when documented. You accept that the friend is enjoyable but not loyal under pressure. You accept that the relative's affection is linked to need. You accept that the partner's public charm does not repair private contempt. You accept that a person may care about you and still be unsafe in certain ways. Clear acceptance ends the cycle of repeated surprise. You are no longer shocked each time the mask switches because you have stopped treating the most flattering version as the entire person. This does not make the loss painless. You may grieve who you believed they were. You may grieve the moments that felt sincere. You may question whether any of it was real. Avoid the temptation to erase the whole relationship. Some moments may have been real. Some care may have been genuine. A person can offer authentic warmth and still lack the integrity to sustain it. The past does not need to become completely false for the present pattern to matter. You are allowed to hold complexity. You can say, "There were meaningful moments, and this relationship is not safe enough for the access I gave it." That is a mature conclusion. It does not depend on hatred, diagnosis, or certainty about motive. It depends on consequence. As the investigation closes, the central lesson is not that people who adapt around power are always deceptive. Social life requires adaptation. Respectful communication changes with role, culture, risk, and context. A person may become more careful around authority, more expressive around friends, and more reserved around strangers, without losing integrity. The danger begins when human value becomes conditional, when warmth consistently flows toward advantage, when patience appears only in the presence of consequences, when loyalty changes with the audience, and when respect disappears around those who cannot retaliate. You are no longer observing ordinary social flexibility. You are observing a relationship to power. That relationship may be driven by fear. It may be driven by ambition, shame, envy, insecurity, entitlement, or learned survival. You may never know the full motive. Fortunately, you do not need to. Your responsibility is not to solve another person's inner world. Your responsibility is to notice how their inner world affects your life. Does the pattern weaken your confidence? Does it make you hide information, chase approval, perform usefulness, or accept disrespect? Does it create confusion that always benefits them? Does it force you to choose between belonging and dignity? These consequences deserve more attention than the person's explanation. Words can clarify, but patterns decide. The strongest response is neither innocence nor suspicion. It is disciplined observation. You watch behavior across status, audience, need, and time. You separate one mistake from repeated structure. You ask direct questions without pretending to know hidden motives. You protect private information before betrayal becomes undeniable. You set boundaries around behavior rather than attacking identity. You let time test promises. You refuse guilt that demands immediate access. You refuse false urgency that prevents reflection. You refuse the belief that someone's charm proves their loyalty, or that their coldness proves your unworthiness. You remain emotionally present without becoming emotionally governed. This is the difference between awareness and paranoia. Paranoia tries to eliminate uncertainty by assuming danger everywhere. Awareness accepts uncertainty while responding proportionately to evidence. Paranoia hardens the heart. Awareness strengthens judgment. You do not need to distrust everyone who smiles at a powerful person. You do not need to analyze every change in tone. You do not need to become cold so no one can use your warmth against you. You need only one internal rule: never let intensity outrun evidence. Let affection be tested by inconvenience. Let loyalty be tested by social cost. Let respect be tested by disagreement. Let apology be tested by time. Let character be tested by the presence of someone who has nothing to offer. And let your own character be tested too. When you gain power, remember the people who cannot benefit you. When you enter an important room, do not forget the person who opened the door. When someone becomes vulnerable, do not treat their need as lower status. When you feel envy, do not turn it into punishment. When you fear authority, do not discharge that fear onto someone safer. Become what you are learning to recognize: a person whose values survive the room, a person who can adapt without performing a different soul, a person whose warmth is not a reward for usefulness, whose respect is not rented to status, and whose kindness does not require an audience. This does not mean offering equal intimacy to everyone. Boundaries are necessary. Discernment is necessary. Some people deserve distance. Some relationships require formality. You can limit access while preserving dignity. You can refuse closeness without becoming contemptuous. Equality does not mean identical treatment. It means refusing to treat human worth as a ranking. When someone's mask switches, you do not need to tear it off. You do not need to announce what you have seen. You do not need to win an argument about who they really are. Simply remember the contrast. Remember who received warmth and who received contempt. Remember what changed when power entered the room. Remember whether the kindness remained after the benefit disappeared. Remember how the person responded when you slowed down, asked questions, or said no. Then decide with a clear mind. Some people will remain in your life at a safer distance. Some will earn deeper trust through consistency. Some will reveal that they wanted access more than connection. Some will surprise you by becoming more honest when the pattern is named. Your task is not to predict every outcome. It is to stop sacrificing your judgment to the version of someone you most want to believe. The face a person shows to power matters. The face they show to vulnerability may matter more. And the moment you learn to observe both without becoming dazzled by one or destroyed by the other, you become far more difficult to deceive. Not because you can read every hidden motive, because you no longer ignore the evidence that behavior places in front of you.